What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So the Dillon Danis Logan Paul boxing match is just over a month away, but the drama is in full effect right now. We've got a Twitter war like you've not seen before going into a fight. This is
one-sided Twitter war, I will say.
Very much so. This is becoming a really heated sort of bad blood situation between Logan and Dillon. I think Dillon's main goal in his whole fighting career is to be the biggest bad guy that he can possibly be the most hated guy in combat sports, and he's clearly doing that here. He's bringing Logan's personal relationship into question. He's drumming up things from his fiance's past in an effort to try to get under Logan's skin. So my question that I have for you is kind of two-pronged. One, do you think it's working? Do you think Logan is getting out of sorts? And then two, do you think that will carry over into the ring? Do you think Logan's going to come out emotional, and is this a calculated move by Danis to try to catch Logan off guard so that he can get him to do exactly what he wants him to do in the ring, so to speak?
Well, before I answer that, I have to say that you said he's bringing up some things from his now fiance's past, and I'll just correct you. He's bringing up everything from his fiance's past, and I think with a month left, we've only scratched the surface as to what we're going to see out of Dillon Danis. And it's so interesting to see a guy who has been the consummate bad guy since the day he got into MMA. I mean, you have to remember, Dillon Danis is the reason Khabib jumped over the octagon and did a flying kick into the crowd. That kick was aimed at Dillon Danis.
Yep.
Dillon is very much the guy who can provoke emotions out of almost anybody in the world. If you can get Khabib out of sorts and get him that angry, you can damn sure do it to Logan Paul, somebody who has shown us many, many times that he can get out of sorts when somebody, plays a little bit rough around the edges with him. And I personally think that it's so interesting that Dillon Danis has come in as the absolute bad guy and is looking like the superhero in this situation. Logan Paul has had all kinds of issues with, being called a scammer and being called a, untrustworthy guy, kind of, doing things that the public eye doesn't really like to see. And so even though he's looking like the face of this whole situation, and Dillon's coming at him as the bad guy, literally leaking bad photos of his girl, leaking photos and videos of his parents, leaking stuff about his brother, his business partner, KSI, everybody, Logan's going for the neck, and he's somehow coming out as the guy that people want to see win this fight. And I just think that is such a difficult task to have as a fighter. Everybody forgets that fighting is a sport and sports are entertainment. At the end of the day, Dillon's trying to drum up some drama and make this thing as big as it can possibly be to line the pockets of everybody involved. Misfits Boxing really benefits if Dillon Danis can break the pay-per-view record for them. Logan Paul really benefits. KSI, Tommy Fury, everybody involved is going to get more money, and they're going to get more eyes on their show if Dillon Danis continues to do what he's doing. But you've got all these issues now where apparently Logan Paul is sending cease and desist orders. He's going and saying, if Dillon doesn't stop doing this and stop tweeting about my girl, then we're going to call off the fight, after he said that Dillon needs to pay $100,000 if he decides not to show up. They've even gone as far as to bring Mike Perry in as the alternate fighter, just so everybody knows that whether Dillon shows up or not, you're going to see Logan Paul fight on this night. And for me, I think all of this stuff is really what's going to help this celebrity YouTube boxing world grow into what it wants to be, or what I thought it could be at one point. When you talk about celebrities boxing, when you talk about YouTubers boxing each other, or MMA guys coming over to box celebrities, we can't just rely on skill alone, because these guys straight up just don't have the skills of the guys that are fighting on Saturday night, that are truly the best fighters in the world, fighting for the world titles, fighting to be unified, undisputed world champions, undefeated records, 30-0, all these types of fighters, your Devin Haney's, your Terrence Crawford's, your Lomachenko's, the best fighters in the world. They don't need to drum up this kind of drama because their skills do the talking. These YouTubers don't have the skills, so they need to bring the drama. And I think Dillon Danis should be awarded, and he should be respected and thanked for bringing all this drama. Obviously, Logan Paul and him aren't going to bring world-class boxing techniques onto the screen, so they got to give us something entertaining. And I have to say, this has been the most entertained I've been for a build-up of a boxing fight in a very long time.
Yeah, me too. And, in total fairness, I think Dillon Danis and John Fury are the reason that a lot of people know about this fight. Tommy Fury and KSI are doing exactly nothing to sell this fight.
Right.
I did not know that KSI was fighting, legitimately did not know until the morning of his last fight because I saw no promotion of it. Yeah. Tommy Fury, I like Tommy, but he lets his dad do the talking, and John has seemed to embrace that role. Tyson does his own thing. Tyson, he has all those skills that you're talking about, and on top of it, he's a showman, which is why Tyson's probably the biggest name in boxing right now. Certainly him and Canelo get the most pay-per-view clicks when it's time to fight.
Right.
And Tommy Fury's just not quite at that level. He's also a lot younger, and so he's kind of coming into his own. But Dillon Danis and John Fury are the ones who are pushing the needle forward on this thing. John is flipping the table and talking about people's personal bollocks and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's entertaining. And that's, like you said, YouTube boxing. You don't tune in to watch Logan Paul box Dillon Danis, who Dillon is a very high-level martial artist, but he's a grappler. He's a jiu-jitsu guy, so his boxing is not world-class by any stretch of the imagination. The level of skill between Logan Paul and Dillon Danis from just a pure boxing perspective, you could go to any boxing gym in your local municipality and go watch the sparring there and see higher-level boxing 100%. Than you're going to see on pay-per-view. So they have to bring the drama. They have to bring the bad blood. And that kind of springboards me into my next question that I have for you. We saw Nate Diaz pull a quote-unquote guillotine on Jake Paul. And Jake said, look, thank God he didn't squeeze because that was in. Mm-hmm. Dillon Danis is more of a bad guy than Jake Paul. And the tension is way higher between him and Logan than it was for his brother Jake and Nate Diaz. They seem to have more of a business understanding than they did have bad blood with one another. Do you think Dillon Danis, what do you think the odds of Dillon Danis pulling a move that is outside the Queensberry rules is in this fight? Do you think he goes for a submission? Do you think he does something that just erupts mayhem in the stadium?
Well, if you want to start to try to predict what's going to happen, and really this fight, you don't truly know what's going to happen. And I don't really see these guys going out there and putting on some sort of boxing clinic and surprising the world with great techniques. But you have to look into the mind of Dillon Danis and what he has done from the time we found out about him when he was training Conor McGregor to get ready for world title fights. And you're like, okay, we don't really know much about this guy, but if Conor McGregor's hiring him, he must have some skills and have some sort of merit amongst the community. And then he comes out and he's kind of like seen as like a diet Conor McGregor. He's saying sort of, tough guy things on Instagram, and nobody really knows how good he is. And then he comes into Bellator after a few years and wins 2 fights pretty quickly, and he does it in pretty dominant fashion. And it was all based on jiu-jitsu. So you're like, okay, so he is a legit badass, but how good is he, and is he going to be able to stay relevant and all of this stuff? And I think a lot of that was up in question up until this fight happened, and or up until this fight was booked. Logan Paul is actually to thank in a lot of ways if you're a Dillon Danis fan, because a lot of people had sort of given up on Dillon Danis in the hopes that he was going to be something major in the sport. Now, obviously, he's maybe the best guy on the entire planet at staying somewhat relevant in the fight world and not fighting. But Dillon Danis right now is proving to us that whether he was injured, whether he had some knee surgeries, whether he had a passing of one of his parents just take place, all of that stuff doesn't really get mentioned in the bad guy realm of Dillon Danis. He sort of leaves all that to the side, and you just get to see him as the character. And whether people call him weak for backing out of fights for whatever reason, they don't really know the true stories. And I think Dillon Danis, if he opened up about that, people would be a lot more understanding as to why he hasn't been as active as people wanted him to be. But I think Dillon Danis, above everything else when it comes to being the fighting character, is he wants to be the guy that is hated the most. He wants to be the bad guy. He wants to be the super villain. And if you think that for a second he's not willing to jeopardize his pay on this fight night, if you think he's not willing to jeopardize the entire Misfits Boxing fight card to have the most viral clip ever in the history of combat sports, which could end in like a bench clearing brawl where you've got 50 people running into the boxing ring to break up him and Logan Paul in what has turned into a street fight within a boxing match, you're crazy. Dillon Danis will 100% do that. And Nate Diaz is one of those guys, right? He's got his character as well, and he grabbed Jake Paul by the neck and threw a little guillotine on him. But that was all, fun-spirited and lighthearted, and everybody knew he wasn't going to actually sit down with that. Dillon Danis is different, and this thing feels way more personal than Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz. This one, these guys are going for the neck, and Dillon Danis just happens to be winning the Twitter beefs right now by about a 10-6 every time they go out there with a round. It's bad. It's not even close. Logan Paul has now disabled his comments. He doesn't even want to hear it. His girl has been radio silent since, July, and nobody wants to admit the fact that these tweets and these little issues are causing a lot of trouble in paradise for the Paul and his fiance new relationship. I think that Dillon Danis is going to go out there and he's going to ruffle some feathers. He's going to continue to antagonize Logan Paul and his fiance. And as of the past couple days, he's going after Jake. He's going after KSI. He's going after both Jake and Logan's parents, their mom and their dad. And if I were to predict this, I don't see this going to decision, and I don't see it going to knockout. I see this fight ending with security pulling these guys off of each other. I think you're going to see Jake in the crowd jump into the ring. I think you're going to see maybe John Fury wind up somehow in the ring. You're going to see some sort of mayhem that might even disrupt the entire night of boxing, and we don't even see the main event happen between KSI and Tommy Fury if everything just goes to hell in a handbasket, all due to Dillon Danis and Logan Paul breaking the rules and just going crazy.
Well, I want to revisit the point you made about Khabib being that out of sorts, because it is really important to note that famous flying kick off the stage that Khabib threw, which Khabib throughout his whole career, start to finish, and even now how he runs his camp in the absence of his late father, is very structured, very disciplined. You don't lose your cool. You don't fight emotionally. And for the fact that Dillon Danis got so under the skin of somebody as buttoned up as Khabib is, if you don't think that he can take Logan to that place and worse, I think you're wrong. And so I could definitely see that, especially if this fight starts not going Dillon's way. Yeah. Dillon does not want to end up a knockout on Logan Paul's highlight reel. No. He will jeopardize the pay. He will pay whatever penalty he's got to pay. If he feels like he needs to resort to jiu-jitsu and choke Logan unconscious or throw a knee or do something of that sort, I think he'll do it because in his head, he's already weighed the consequence, the financial consequence that he would lose by doing something like that against the virality of whatever that situation materialized into. And I think that he'd be willing to go there if the fight started going a way he didn't want it to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And Logan Paul has actually never won a boxing match. So I think he'd really like to get a win over Dillon Danis as his first one. But Dillon's going to do everything in his power, including break the rules, to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think if you look at Dillon Danis from a perspective of an entertainer right now, he has the entire crowd on his side. He's got fans that he never even dreamed he could have, I think. And, the way that the internet has taken fire and the way that everybody's sort of pointing their guns at Logan Paul and has backed Dillon Danis, that shows you that regardless of what happens in this fight, whether it ends in a bench clearing brawl or he knocks out Logan Paul or it goes to decision or Logan Paul knocks him out, Dillon Danis has created quite an army for himself. And I think after this fight, he's going to have a lot of people tuning in to see whatever it is he does next. And I think Misfits Boxing, Celebrity Boxing, YouTube Boxing, whatever you want to call it, is a better place if Dillon Danis is in it.
I would agree.